I think it's so nice to be able to lean into your taste and kind of build a collection of items and surround yourself with objects that truly make you really feel fueled and creative and kind of excited to live. So I think the fact that I've stayed really true to my taste, even when some people might have questioned if something is home decor or not, for me that's what decor is all about. It's about pushing the limits, it's about being creative, it's about just having things in your home that give you a sense of yourself. Hello, I'm Rosie. I'm a director and a content creator living in my 45 square metre apartment in West London, and I've lived here for about 1 year. Before I moved in, the flat was very much a kind of blank canvas, empty box. None of the woodwork or anything was here. It was very much kind of tourist chic, I guess you could say, in terms of decor. So really not my style, you know, canvases of London and kind of rugs with the London skyline and that kind of thing. So I knew I kind of wanted to get rid of that and bring my own personality and character into the space. I wanted to make a bit of a feature of the entryway because when I first moved in there was really sort of nothing there to kind of zone out the space. So I decided to create a small little unit that kind of was consistent with the rest of the feel of the birch plywood in the apartment, that could basically store shoes, you know, have a bowl for my keys in there, a little lamp, some perfume by the door. And opposite that you've got this old antique butcher's sign, Edwards, which is a real sort of, yeah, statement piece again to kind of add a bit of interest to that nook. As you come into the flat, you've got the kitchen on the right and the living area on the left. And I really wanted to kind of zone out the space so it felt like the living room was its own separate area of that floor. So I did that by kind of having a nice anchoring rug to really sort of solidify the area that is the living room. And then around the rug kind of built out a couple of key pieces of furniture. Obviously there's not a load of space, so I was quite specific with those 3 key pieces. I've got a classic Lin Rosé Togo sofa, which I've been eyeing up for a long time. They're a very classic piece in the world of furniture, and I went for this kind of mustard colour because I think it brings a really lovely sort of like warm retro pop of colour into the space, because I've gone for quite neutral walls, so it really kind of, yeah, injects that sense of personality in immediately. And also I was quite limited on the sofa options for that area because it is quite snug, so the Togo also fits perfectly in that space. And then the coffee table I actually made, so that was created out of glass bricks which I glued together. And I've done a kind of little Wes Anderson display on there with a few of my books, my camera, and some nice little kind of graphic pieces from the 60s as well. And then as you kind of pan up, we've got the sort of central piece, I suppose, of the space, which is this massive bookshelf, which goes all the way up to the super tall ceilings. And I really wanted to kind of create something on the wall that would honor the height of the space because it's really quite impressive. And so I built out all of this hidden storage sort of along the base of the unit for, you know, to have some storage for all my, you know, tech and art supplies, bits and pieces that could be kind of nicely stowed away. And then I've also got a coat cupboard for jackets, coats, shoes, Hoover, that kind of thing. And then the rest of the unit is open shelving, which kind of houses all of my books, all of my kind of vintage objects that I try and curate really beautifully up there, and loads of kind of plants to give it this very like organic mid-century feel at the top. So it's really quite a statement piece as you walk into the room, and it's got a ladder as well that you can use to kind of move along the unit and get up and down. The kitchen beforehand was quite an inefficient space. They didn't really make the most of all the kind of nooks and crannies that they could have. So I wanted to rejig a few of the elements of it and kind of add in that, again, birch plywood feel that we're going with in the rest of the apartment. So I sort of redid all the doors with this birch plywood feel, redid the countertop in just a sort of white laminate to really reflect more light into that corner. Then the kitchen backsplash I used with leftover tiles from my bathroom renovation, and I actually decided to spray paint half of them blue. So I did that myself to kind of, you know, reuse some of the materials I already had to create this sort of diner-inspired kind of 50s Americana backsplash feel, which just adds, again, a nice sort of burst of colour over there, but hopefully nothing too kind of intense. It still feels quite pared back and sort of curated in there. And I introduced this sort of little pantry down by the dishwasher, just to have more space for all my kind of tins and cans. And then also wanted to get rid of the bulky cabinetry sort of up top. So I opted for this open shelving unit, which I think just in a small space makes everything feel a little less bulky, allows a bit more light, allows a nice display of some of my cool kind of vintage kitchenware, and just brings a bit of lightness to that kind of top section of the space. I went for this little table. It's actually a custom size because I couldn't find anything small enough. But what it does have is the ability to be opened out. So there's a leaf that you can insert into the center of the table. If I wanted to have more friends over for dinner or something, I can just insert the leaf and the table extends, and then I've got, you know, a nice larger sort of table to use. And I've also got this antique kind of upcycled French cabinet that's again really nice storage for all my sort of crockery and plates, and allows another surface for sort of books and lamps, which just adds a bit of a kind of finishing touch to the dining area. The bedroom is quite a small room, and I really wanted to embrace the kind of smallness of it by making it feel really cozy and kind of cocooning. So I opted to colour drench the whole room in this sort of muted sage green colour, which just gives it a very kind of spa-like calming feel. And then in terms of storage, I actually utilised this very small space under the stairs on the way down into the bedroom for my clothes. So I've got my trousers in there, and then as you go into the main bedroom space, I have a rail on the side of the wall for kind of hanging pieces. But what's cool about that is it's actually a fold in half hanger system. So it sits flush against the wall, and it means all my clothes can sit really tightly and snugly there, rather than a normal kind of hanger size that tends to come out a bit further. And then I also put a textured rug down just to add a bit of like neutrality and coziness on the floor, and decided to just have a couple of pieces of art in there just to add enough colour to give it a bit of personality. I went for sort of pops of red, which I think works really well with the green, but I didn't want to go too crazy with decor, as I've sort of done quite a lot in the rest of the apartment already, and I think it's nice to have that space feel a little more pared back and kind of a space to first and foremost relax in. The bathroom was quite a rundown space when I first moved into the apartment. Just a lot of the tiles were really outdated and badly cut. There were a lot of gaps and holes, and I just felt that it needed a bit of modernising so the bathroom could run nicely for another 10, 20 years whilst I was in the space. So I decided to go for a kind of Wes Anderson theme in there, and I went with quite a kind of geometrical and symmetrical feel with a sort of very standard square white tile, which I think makes the space feel really kind of spa-like and quite calming. But then I have this pop of colour with a burst of yellow on the ceilings and a kind of muted yellow grout that I used in between the tiles as well, which I think just adds this really nice sort of injection of character in there, whilst not dominating the space with too much colour. And then I wanted to do a bit of a kind of gallery wall in there as well. So above the sink area, I've just got a couple of antique pieces up there, a few pieces of art, just to kind of have something to look at when I'm in there and kind of feel quite creative and inspired when I'm getting ready in the morning. And then I've also got these lovely shelves, which are kind of built into this alcove. And they're again just full of antique pieces and plants to make the space feel really sort of creative and nice to be in. What's really cool about the apartment is it has this mezzanine space. Because the ceilings are so high, there's this little sort of, lofted area, which is just enough space for some really kind of nice extra details in the apartment. So beforehand, I didn't feel that the previous owner really made the most of the space. There were kind of these old grey carpets up there, this very squeaky kind of rusted wardrobe sitting along one wall, which wasn't particularly usable. So I knew that it could be much more efficient. And so I designed this kind of unit that incorporated a sort of spare bed, daybed sort of sofa situation with storage underneath, and then some extra storage as well for clothing rail for hanging up washing, extra suitcases, sort of bulkier items that I couldn't really necessarily put elsewhere in the space. And then what my favorite part is about that unit is the pull-out desk, which is super cool and basically allows me to kind of stow it away when not in use. But when I just want a different place to work, a different area to kind of sit in the apartment, I can pull out that desk and work up there, which is really cool. And there's also this little strange alcove in the mezzanine as well. Didn't know quite what to do with that area, but decided to have this little box that can hide away all my printing supplies and stuff that I use sort of for my art. So that can kind of sit nicely away in there, and that movable, usable box that can kind of be multifunctional. I could pull it out into the space if I wanted another surface and that kind of thing. So it's a really kind of useful piece in the mezzanine. And then just to kind of cozy up the space, I added a rug, some nice decor, a pegboard, which sort of again makes the space feel quite cozy and cocooned, and means I can just be quite flexible with decor and storage up there as well. So yeah, I wanted to kind of inject even more kind of personality up there with plants and decor as well. I lived in this flat building for about 5 years when I first moved to London, and I loved it so much, and I knew I really wanted to try and stay here for as long as possible. So when I was in a position where I was able to buy, I wrote letters to lots of the flats in the building to kind of see if anyone was willing to have a conversation about selling their flat to me. And I managed to find this space, which was amazing, and really wanted to kind of bring my own sense of character and playfulness and eclecticism into the space. So I wanted to have pops of colour, but still sort of fairly pared back and curated, so that the space still felt quite kind of calm and relaxed and kind of anchored by a lot of the woodwork that you see in the space. So you've got this mix of texture and colour, but predominantly the space is feeling pretty calm and relaxed, even though it's still quite characterful. That is a challenging question because I have lots of objects in my flat. It's sort of one of my pride points in my space because I'm such a kind of object curator and collector. I love going to antique markets. I love kind of going to car boot sales and sort of digging around and finding weird and wonderful things. So there's lots to choose from. I would say if we're going to pick, I got this R lamp, which wasn't meant to be a lamp. It was actually originally part of a carnival sign, and it has these lights inside. And I just thought it was quite serendipitous because the R is obviously the first letter of my name, Rosie, but also my favorite color is red. So it just felt like the perfect sort of lamp for that space. And I just think it's really characterful and quirky and always gets everyone talking when they come in. I've then got my dad's vintage travel guides up on the bookshelf, and he kept these from the 80s. So there's about 20 or so travel guides of loads of different places, and I just think it's really cool to now have these on my shelves. And just, it's super funny to look back through the travel guides and see the kinds of things that were sort of recommended and the style of, journalism at that time. So I just think they're really kind of quirky and fun. And then in the kitchen, I've got this vintage sweet cabinet, which would have been in a sweet shop back in the day. And it's still got the original sweets inside. And I'm sort of too much of a preserver that I struggle to throw things away sometimes. So I thought, oh my God, the sweets have come in the cabinet. I can't throw them away because they're original sweets that would have been in that shop back in the day. So until they get really gross, they are going to stay there. But I think they're just, again, a really fun point of conversation. It's really cool seeing the old prices, all the labels of the sweets in there, the packaging. And I just think it's a really sort of quirky piece that's a fun addition to the kitchen. And I love that it's kind of sort of food related as well. I think it works perfectly in there. Got a few favourite spots in my flat. I would say the first one is the mezzanine, as it just feels like sort of being in a tree house or a bunk bed or something. It feels like such a kind of whimsical, childlike dream to have a sort of lofted space that I can kind of, hide away in, look over the whole apartment, feel sort of above the clouds. So it's a really calming, beautiful addition to the apartment, which I love sort of being in. I would say being up my ladder. I think, again, another sort of childhood dream of, being up trees and tree houses and bunk beds and all that. So again, it's really fun to kind of climb up the ladder and be right at the top of the bookshelf looking down on the entire apartment. And I'm up there fairly often to water all of my plants, which sit at the very top of the bookcase. So it's very fun to be up there. And then lastly, I would say my Togo sofa, which is such an amazing piece to have. I've loved kind of Togo sofas for a while. It's really cool to have a piece in my flat. And I just love the shape of it. I love sitting in it. I feel that it's very kind of cocooning and allows me to just relax and switch off. My home makes me really happy because I just feel like it's a reflection of me to the core. I feel like I, have such a specific taste, I think, in objects and style. Like I love that kind of 50s graphic feel. So have loads of sort of weird items that wouldn't necessarily be home decor items, like packaging or labels or signage that I think are really beautiful. Like for me, they're pieces of art, and maybe to someone else, they'd think, what on earth is going on? But I love that. I think it's so nice to be able to lean into your taste and kind of build a collection of items and surround yourself with objects that truly make you really feel fueled and creative and kind of excited to live. So I think the fact that I've stayed really true to my taste, even when some people might have questioned if something is home decor or not, for me that's what decor is all about. It's about pushing the limits, it's about being creative, it's about just having things in your home that give you a sense of yourself.
Could you tell us something surprising about yourself?
So I would say that art is a huge passion of mine. I keep a sketchbook and I have done for about 5 years or so. So I love drawing and painting and kind of recording the world. So whenever I'm traveling or just out and about, I tend to have my sketchbook with me, and I'll often do a painting or a drawing of where I am just to kind of capture a sort of visual diary. And I think that's quite a fun thing that my friends love seeing, and it's just a great fun record of where I've been. You can find me at Hey Rosie Dart on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube as well. I've been sharing short form content for about a year, really showcasing my space, my love of vintage, cinematic spaces as well. And I'm really excited to kind of get into longer form content in the near future as well, and kind of really diving into all the details of my space. So if you love sort of cool interiors, film interiors, in real life cinematic spaces, I think you're probably going to love what I create, so come along and join the community.